Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Behind the Profile, a feature set really just trying to get to know the people behind these LinkedIn profiles that we scroll down on our news feed. We see all these interesting people with all these intersecting, winding career paths. And this person that I came across was one of those individuals. Her name is Jennifer Jehl, and she is a life coach. Wait, before you tune out, it's not that kind of life coach. Not necessarily the kind of life coach that a lot of people may assume. Being a lady, she really focuses on empowering men, right? Isn't that kind of like an interesting career path? So everybody, welcome Jennifer Jehl to the show. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thanks so much for having me, Joey.
Of course. Thanks for making some time for us here. It's been a while since I've recorded one of these, but really it is about getting to know the people behind the profile on LinkedIn. Now they can read your bio, which will be attached in the comments, and they can scan the QR code up in the corner there to get more information about you and what you do throughout this interview. I didn't mean for that to rhyme. But I really want to get to what brought you into being a life coach. It's specifically working with men, because when I hear a lot about empowerment in this culture that we live in, generally it's women empowering women. What is it about your past that made you want to do something so bold?
Right. So I'm going to try to make a very long story as short as possible. So my entire life until about almost 4 years ago, I was what I consider a toxic people pleaser. So I put myself into bad situations because I was too afraid of other people's reactions or disappointing people or, all the things. So I got myself into very bad relationships, very abusive financially, physically, verbally, everything. My children were involved. My parents were involved. I altered the lives of my family because I didn't have a handle on who I was. And I finally hit rock bottom about 3.5 years ago. I was in a relationship with somebody who I, again, altered my entire life for, lost a ton of money because he was a con man. I ignored red flags, had no boundaries, moved my entire family to another state. It was really, really bad, abusive. And then it started trickling over into my son who has special needs. And at that point, that's the rock bottom. I let something bad happen to my child who was already fighting for his life to begin with. And so literally the next day, I ran away in the middle of the night with my family, moved us all back to Texas, and immediately began changing my life. So in order to do that, I had to discover who I was because I never really knew. My parents raised me very well, but they raised me to be a studious person, not a common sense, confident person. Nothing bad on their part. They're amazing. But I just didn't have any sense of who I was, vision, purpose. I defined myself around other people, and I was a wife of this person. I was, I was in a victim mindset for sure. So it took some work. I got out of the victim mindset and I realized that it was all me. I allowed those things to come into my life and I knew that I needed to change drastically. So I quickly got into therapy, got a life coach, got a business mentor, discovered my authenticity in all the different areas of life, spiritually, financially, physically, mentally, emotionally, relationally, and what I want my legacy to be. Even, free time, I politically, religiously, I had to literally recreate myself. And in doing so, which was a lot of work, it took a lot of deep work. I realized that, I had a really strong passion for helping others. And I wanted to use the tools that I implemented in my own life to help others change their life. So I originally wanted to help the woman that I was. And it was interesting because I found that they didn't really want to be helped, even though they thought they did, at least the ones that I came across. I really saw that I could do something important for women who are in my same position, driven women, but in bad situations because they didn't have boundaries and they were people pleasing. So I tried for about 6 months, but they just weren't willing to take the action necessary to change because they were too afraid. So I had a great experience with my first male client, and I changed this man's life. He was a very driven professional in the corporate world, but he was lacking balance in his relationships. He was even in a toxic relationship. He wasn't happy with his job because of the people he worked with. They didn't align with his values and beliefs. He had a bad relationship with his adult son. The list goes on. But I was able to help him redefine his life, get into some really great daily consistency, habit-wise, belief-wise. And after working with him, I kind of became passionate about helping men. So I started doing that. And then I got into the concept of biblical masculinity, which is what I really like to talk about now, because I think I'm so passionate about it because I have seen the detrimental effects of a weak man in my family and especially in society and to himself. And I think our society as a whole is completely emasculated. I think people are starting to speak up against it now. So that's one of my goals, is to constantly speak up about the need to be the true masculine, not what society has defined as, when they hear the word masculine, they automatically go to toxic. And it's just not the case. There's no such thing as a toxic masculine. There's toxic as in people in general. It's not, what people think. So kind of helping the world correct that and bring back strong men is what I'm really passionate about now, just because of the lack of it I have had in my life.
I was going to ask where that stemmed from, because a lot of times, just people that I've encountered, people that are hurt, let's say by, men, right? They kind of don't want to be around them, maybe don't want to have anything to do with them, stay far away from them. But you gravitated toward the people that caused some of the trauma. So it must have been pretty humbling for you to kind of coach and mentor the same men that proverbially would have caused the trauma that led you to that very place where you were assisting them. How do you process that interaction, that connection that you have with them, being that, you're a lady looking for healing, but also that we live in a society, as you mentioned, that does put the claim of toxicity before masculinity, no matter what, right?
Right. So it is humbling. And I think throughout my own journey, I think, I'm a very Christian person. I think God has somehow called me to be passionate about this subject and really tried to be a voice in the movement of bringing back the strong man. So it's just something that brings me true joy, like not happiness, because there's a big difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is just a fleeting moment of feeling, but joy comes from purpose. And I feel like that's my purpose besides being a mother. So being able to help men see that they should not be ashamed of being a man, because that's what we've done to men. Men are afraid to be strong because I think, everyone wants to fill the world with weak men so they can be controlled. And in a world of weak men, we're all just living in some sort of world of tyranny or something. So bringing that back, and I've come up with 8 different principles of biblical masculinity that I actually work through with men in my coaching program. And it just, it's a way to tie in, classic traditional principles with also personal growth. And I think it's just really special, and for men to feel empowered, whereas in the past they've been kind of muffled. I think it's important.
Let me push back a little bit and kind of play the role of devil's advocate here, because I have been on some of your LinkedIn posts and I've looked through some of the comments, and there has been some resistance, right?
Yeah.
You've gotten some feedback, which is good, right? Because those conversations kind of challenge our worldviews, which make us stronger in the end. Because if we can't defend our positions, well, maybe those aren't our true positions after all. Like you talked about authenticity, but you also talked about an agenda, right? There being something greater at play. And I don't know about you, but and even my wife notices it. the portrayal of men as the helpless, dumb idiots that can't do anything in society.
Yeah.
What ultimately can we do, in your opinion, as a community, especially here on LinkedIn, this platform, to empower each other to really kind of eliminate that stereotype and that perceived reality? Because the truth is that's not true at all.
Right. And you're right. It's been really perpetuated through Hollywood, marketing, and the government, really. It's just a really sad thing. So I think what we can do is, speak up. I think a lot of people are just afraid to speak up. They don't want to state an opinion that may get hate, because that's a very uncomfortable place to be. I've kind of learned to embrace it. And, I do get a lot of pushback in some of my posts, especially about masculinity. There was one that I posted, had like 120 comment argument between an atheist and a Christian. And it was just incredible to read. I didn't really participate in the argument. I did at first, but then it just went on and on and on. Now, one of the things I do get the most pushback from currently is, one of my characteristics is emotional vulnerability. And men don't like that. They think that, not all, some of them really do see that as something that they should be. But a lot of men feel, and women actually feel, that a man should not be vulnerable to his family, or, in a position of leadership, even in his workplace. But I think that's something that's really important, that creates connection and trust. And it's necessary to be a masculine man. So I do get a lot of, I would say the most pushback on that one.
A lot of pushback you might get too from people is, Jennifer, aren't you kind of like shooting fish in a barrel here? Because every man wants to feel affirmed, wants to feel respected. And here's an attractive woman telling them, you're great, you can do this. Now, pay the receptionist on your way out.
Yeah.
How do you flesh that out?
So here's what I would say to that, and people have asked me, like, what makes you qualified to speak on this or even be passionate about it? Because you're a woman, like, why do you care? But what I would say to that is, what qualifies anybody to talk about that subject specifically? I think, yeah, you could be qualified to talk about medicine if you're a doctor, qualified to talk about law if you're an attorney. But what makes anyone qualified to talk about masculinity? It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. I think if you're so passionate about it, and if you've had experience with it and you've done the research, you just want to help people from the bottom of your heart be able to embrace that part of themselves. I think that's what matters. I think being a woman doesn't disqualify me to talk about it.
Oh, 100% in agreement with that. I always like to pose the questions so that people will hear your response ahead of time, so you can save them the social embarrassment that you'll cause them on LinkedIn when you school them. And
I like that.
Ratio, get ratioed on that thread. But again, in case you're just joining us, we are with Jennifer Jehl. She's a thought leader. She's a life coach. She works with men specifically. And that's something that really piqued my interest. But engaging and looking at some of her content has me more interested to kind of dive into her mind and see where her head is on some things. You mentioned the Bible and faith in Jesus and all that. And I think it's super important because it can be a compass for a lot of people. But you mentioned a specific Bible book, chapter, and verse, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, and how you've applied that in your own life. I'm very interested in why and how, and if that still is relevant as it was the day you made that piece of content.
So God putting evil works to good, that's essentially what it is. And I feel like my struggles, as bad as they were, and as traumatic as they were throughout my life, really, led me to learn lessons, led me to learn from my struggles and use those struggles as opportunities to do better. But then the ultimate way to give back and really take from those struggles is to serve others. And I believe that's truly what we're here on earth for. God placed us here to be able to learn, struggle, overcome, and serve others with all of our good lessons and advice and wisdom that we gain through him. And so being able to serve others is the true joy of my life. And it doesn't just, pertain to men. in the overall picture. I just am a giver, and I love everybody no matter what they believe in. And I will always, want to be able to help push people to be their best. So that's at the underlying, purpose of me. So being able to get rid of any kind of victim mindset I ever had and really embrace the fact that God gave me gifts in struggle. Even my special needs son, he requires a lot of work. He's had so many surgeries and so many things happen, but that's a gift. Like his precious life and the struggles that we've been through with him has been a gift in order to serve others, just, maybe having another child like him, So I feel like everything is a gift, even though it's hard to believe in the midst of it, but it's all meant for good.
Right. That's such a deep insight. That's like real life wisdom, turning those trials and tribulations and actually looking at suffering as a present,
Yeah,
because God knows, sometimes we look for comfort, but you've been a proponent of pursuing that which is hard. Like, why do we look at life in a way that makes us want to pursue what's easy, right? Something that you talk about in your content is the idea of the 4-minute mile, and how forever there was this train of thought that it's physically impossible. There's no human being ever. Let's not talk about it. Can't be done. But then it was done, and it's been
yeah,
done more than once, more than twice, more than three. So it's almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy of being able to do things and not being able to do it, and whether we believe it is true, whether we don't believe it, it's also true.
it
Speak to
is.
that.
So that 4-minute mile thing, people believed that it was impossible to run it under that time. And then after the first person did, so many others did, because they knew that it was possible. They had a belief that it could be accomplished. And then they went further, deeper, and said, I can do it too. If you have a belief in yourself for anything that you want to do, you can do it. So I think, I'm a big believer in the concept of positive manifestation as well as negative, because you can negatively manifest too, but positive manifestation. So it requires a belief and it requires an action. And as long as you do both parts, you can pretty much do anything, and good things will come to you. And, you have to act, which a lot of people think, you can just sit on the couch and, think to yourself, I'm going to win the lottery today and it'll just happen because they're manifesting it. Well, no, that's not going to happen, but you have to take, appropriate action in order to reach what you see and what you believe for yourself. So the belief and the action. So that's what happened with that 4-minute mile, and you can apply to anything. And I think that's really powerful. And I think also, going back to what maybe you mentioned a second ago, is having the desire to stay outside of your comfort zone most of the time. The comfort zone is your place of, easy, mediocre, maybe, it's just, you don't have to try. It's just go with the flow kind of everyday life. And it's not going to get you to that next level. So I also like to think of life as like a video game. So you don't want to just be stuck on the same level every day of your life. That would be really, really boring. You want to be able to level up. And in order to do that, you have to step out of your comfort zone and take risks. And knowing that when you take a risk, maybe you fail, maybe you don't. But either way, you're going to gain something huge.
Yeah. Warp zones, right? Warp zones. Get into that
Yeah.
level 4, level 8, and something that I've heard one of my favorite athletes, Jehl, say, you either win or you learn. So
Yeah.
whether it's one of those things that you never tried, well, you won't ever know unless you try. For instance, my 4-minute mile coming up is coaching my son's baseball team. I don't know
Oh,
anything about
nice.
baseball. I love baseball, but I don't know how to coach a child. I barely know how to communicate with my 6-year-old on basic around the house things. He's starting to understand reason. I'm starting to be able to, to speak reason to him and to use logic. And he's like, okay, that makes sense. And it's such a blessing now, because I'm like, oh, thank God. Whereas before it was just, you just believe me because I know better. Okay. Now
Yeah. Yeah.
Dad's not a total moron, right? What I say makes sense sometimes. Just put it in action. But One of the
I love
things
that.
also that I notice in society, you said this word manifest and manifestation. And you're right, there is a lot of power and self-fulfilling power in the words that we speak or don't speak, words that are spoken or not spoken over us and to us and about us. As a believer in God and what Jesus has to say about faith and everything, how do you navigate the waters as a life coach, specifically speaking to men, and speak to your clients without dipping your toes into that secular view of manifestation? What does that look like for you?
I've actually gotten some things back about how manifestation in general is not something that is faith-based. And so I would like to research more into that. But I think God wants us to feel like we have a purpose. He wants us to be competent in a skill that pleases him. And in order to do that, you have to create a vision. Okay. So a vision, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, spiritually, physically, financially, relationships, emotionally, mentally, all of the things. Creating a vision is something I think he wants us to do as well. And when you have that vision, you can create steps in order to manifest what you see in your vision. And I think as long as it works along with your faith to please God and you feel like you're very called to do what it is you're doing, I think that's the most important part. So faith and manifestation can work hand in hand to please God.
That's amazing. In case you're just joining us, we are with Jennifer Jehl, and we have so much to get to. We only have so much time. Whatever questions I don't ask, you can ask her. Drop in on the comments on YouTube, here on LinkedIn, wherever you're watching this and listening to this, engage. Ask questions. She'll respond to you. One of the questions that I had while I was researching you was about boundaries, because again, that's just another word that we use, but they're so important, right? We drive down roads and there's guardrails that keep us from flying off of cliffs. In our parenting, we keep our kids from dying before they're 18 by telling them to stay out of the street. That's how kids die. They get hit by cars, so on and so
Right.
forth. Endless analogies. When you speak to these men specifically, it's not always about a work life balance. Sometimes they got that figured out. Sometimes I know how to leave my briefcase in the car when I come home. Sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes it can be work balance. As you mentioned before, you don't get to choose your coworkers, but you have to navigate those waters, be professional, be diplomatic, but also be who you are. How do you encourage men to do just that?
So that's also a great question. I think, again, I think a lot of my clients are in that middle age group where, they've been a husband, they've been a father for so long, and they've been in their career for this, 20-year period or something. And they're kind of in that complacent, mediocre, life is good, but is there something more? Who am I really besides a father and a husband? So I think in order to be fully authentic in both the work and the home, I think you again, it goes back to rediscovering who you are. You have to I think it's good to reevaluate all of your different pieces of key areas of life every few years in order to keep leveling up and growing. I don't think you ever want to be at a place where you're not growing. So in order to lead in your career, to lead in your home, I think you have to have full confidence, not egotistical confidence, but the confidence that requires nothing validation wise from anybody else. And once you have that full confidence, because you are fully embracing your authenticity, because you've taken the time beforehand to figure out, well, where do I sit here right now? Where do I sit here? What do I want? I think it's so much easier to go about work and home and embrace that masculine, confident self and be in that position of leadership, if that makes sense.
I'm just soaking it all in. This is great. Before you talked about, the work life, knowing who they are at work, knowing who they are at home. I want to get to what you call reciprocal servitude here in a moment. But you said something about who the man is and his authentic self and, looking for validation, looking for that attaboy, good job, And I think a lot of men, I'll speak for myself, we can find that in our work, right? Because it's task oriented. We have a goal, we set our goal, we do all the steps to get the goal done. When it's accomplished, we feel like we've done something because we have. But it can kind of be misleading and lead down paths that aren't necessarily rewarding at the end of, one's lifetime. Do you ever get that kind of feedback from men, maybe wishing they had, what's the number one thing they wish they had done differently, maybe as they were aspiring career people, maybe some stuff that they neglected along the way, family, kids? What's some of the feedback that you get, Jennifer?
Yeah, I get actually a lot of that. And it's across the board. I've had clients who have completely neglected even starting a family because they were so career focused. I've had people, going back to being authentic, the number one deathbed regret across the board is not living to be your true self. So I think that would include a whole lot of things. And that's just really sad. Like, I wouldn't want someone to be living their last day here and realize, I did every single thing that everyone else expected me to do and nothing that I actually wanted to do because of societal norms, my family, my parents, what will they think? And I think, even when it comes down to, I've had a lot of clients who are in great careers. Like I told you about my first client, he wasn't fulfilled with who he was as a person, working with people he didn't align with. He was lucky. This probably wouldn't be the case for everybody, but he was able to find the exact same job at a different company with people he really respected and actually get paid more. So that was something that was very lucky for him. That would maybe be a little bit hard to accomplish for everybody because of different circumstances. But, I think a lot of the time what I find most actually though, is the imbalance in work and home. So, they're super focused at work. They let their marriage slide. They let their duties as a father slide. I think that's what I get the most of. And that is really close to my heart because of my past. And you can definitely have all the balance. You can have a great marriage. You can have a great experience at work. You can be excelling in both areas at the same time. If you just, it all takes action. Even if you think about a marriage, people always tell me about their marriages just falling apart. Well, it takes two people and a daily choice of being there for each other, however that looks to each, individual in the marriage. I'm going to do this and this and this, and well, I'm going to do this and this and this. And together we're going to make our marriage grow. I mean, that's the point of marriage, is to choose daily. It's not a feeling. It's not a feeling of love. It's a choice daily. And I think it's a choice daily at work, and it's a choice daily for your own personal growth. You have to choose what you want to do to level up. So that's another thing I focus on with my clients, is creating those tailored action steps for work, for marriage, for yourself, for your kids, tailored action steps to achieve exactly what you want.
Yeah. We're going to get all of those links for everybody to connect with you, Jennifer, after the show here. Feel free to connect with her and book your appointment, because this is great stuff. And this is just scratching the surface, y'all. This is not what you're going to get so much more when you actually talk to Jennifer after this. But I want to get back to what you talked about before, right? Like, you bring the briefcase home. Now you're a dad. Now you're a husband. Before, you were the CEO, the CIO, the CFO, the C-suite, right? You were important, right? You had a tie on and you listen to tie. Goodness, it's so hot in this car. In my Escalade, right? AC's just got the AC fixed. I'm just going off on a tangent. Suburban America, right? First world problems. And you get home, the kids want to play with you, right? Because that's what kids want to do. And the wife wants you to play with the kids because God knows she is done. Like, she's been draped all over her all day. She doesn't want to
say that personally.
Like, I'm tired of feeling needed, right? I just want to 10 minutes. Just let me sit here with my glass of wine, my Costco wine, and just relax. Okay. And then the guy comes home and he's like, I just sat in traffic for 45 minutes and was at work all day doing deals, trying to make. So you're right. It does take two people being honest, being active, showing reciprocal servitude.
Yeah.
And I think I have an idea of what that could mean, but I'm going to do what every other guy does when they don't 100% know what they're doing and say, but I'm going to let you kind of, unpack that for us, Jennifer.
So that whole idea of reciprocal servitude, again, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, I think that's why we are here as people on earth. That's what we were created to be, reciprocal servitude. Jesus was the same way. If you think about it, I mean, he washed people's feet. He loved, he forgave, he helped, he did all of the things and gave his life for us. Reciprocal servitude, maybe I'll get some hatred for this, but as far as a marriage, I truly believe in traditional gender roles, and people either love me for that or people hate me for that. But I think the husband has a certain role, and that's to be that masculine, traditional man. I think the woman has a certain role, but then together, yeah, they have to help each other. If someone is not 100%, well, the other person's going to have to pick it up. Maybe 30-70 one day, maybe 40-60. I think being there for each other, knowing, and I think it all comes down to that important piece of vulnerability. It takes a strong man to be able to say to his wife, hey, I'm not feeling it today. Can you help me out or give me some advice or some thoughts on this? I think to be able to say that to someone you love, it just opens the door for her to do the same thing. It opens the door for your kids to trust you more. Some people think that you shouldn't be that way with your children, because your children should see you as a strong force that can't be manipulated, is never afraid of anything. But I think that's the wrong way to go. I think you need to be able to express your fears and your worries and your concerns and even all of your positive feelings in order to be a leader. And I think men should be the leaders of the home. So I don't know if that answers your question. I'm like going off on so many tangents right now.
All good. That's what we do. This is what we do here. This is great. You just talked about the home life, right? It takes a balance, both male and female, playing whatever roles work for them to make it work. So how do women find their beauty and strength in light of the modern feminist movement that to a lot of people is anything but truth? Where do you align yourself with being a woman, and how do you align that with people speaking on your behalf for you in modern day media?
This is something I've actually been doing a lot of introspection, kind of reflection on lately. I feel like, so I am a single mom of 3 kids, and I believe that I am consistently living in my masculine, and it's not what I was meant to do. Yes, I was supposed to be a strong woman, I'm supposed to be able to lead my family, but I think something is missing, and I'm doing a fine job at it. But living in my masculine has led me to kind of realize that I'm not living in my feminine energy at all. And I think in order to live in your true feminine energy, kind of need that counterpart. And I think, so I really believe in that masculine energy paired with the feminine energy. And I think the whole feminist movement, yeah, it's totally destroyed the traditional woman. I should be empowered and feel great that I'm, in the position I am. And I am. I wouldn't have it any other way right now. But at the same time, I don't want that forever. I want to be able to live in my feminine as I was meant to be, I think. And so I need a counterpart. And so I think the two, maybe it goes back, and maybe I'm being too religious at this point, but it goes back to, Adam and Eve, they were created to have a feminine and masculine, coupling together. And I think, again, that's what we were supposed to do.
Well, before we wrap, I want to get to the 8 things that, you feel like men can do to make their life better just at the end of the day. But before we get to that, and we're going to put your contact info up, this is something that really got to me. The scaling of female pathology on social media. And I see this everywhere. It's gossip, it's slander, it's just hate and spite. And we see a lot of dudes doing it, usually on politics and news and sports. But I see a lot of females increasing in this, and that makes it increasingly difficult to be who God has called them to be in his word. I'm not talking about quiet in the corner women. I'm talking about powerful, empowered, outspoken women.
Yeah.
We're designed to be. How do you navigate those waters, not only yourself in response to some of the comments that you've received on your own content, but also how do you encourage the men that are your clients to encourage the ladies in their life to navigate those waters?
Yeah, I think that's so that whole concept, I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan. So I use a lot of his content to get some ideas for my own content. I reshare a lot of his stuff. He's my idol, I think. I really truly believe in everything he believes in. And yeah, I mean, the fact that social media has led people to become sort of this antisocial personality disorder type people. It's so true. And I think, unfortunately for business to survive, in most businesses to survive, except for, maybe some corporations, you have to use social media, and it's evil. Yeah, it's evil. No doubt about it. But I think if you use it the correct way, it can be used for good. So that's really what I try to do. And, I kind of reevaluate who I follow and who I let follow me as much as possible, because I try to keep any negative energy out of my business. I just want to inspire and motivate people to live their best life. And I think social media can be used the entirely wrong way, which is what most people use it for. It's very toxic and it is ruining relationships. People don't even have sex anymore. Supposedly, the occurrence of people having normal relationships and having sexual experiences with one partner is at the lowest it's ever been, And I think that whole social media has also contributed to the emasculation of men in general too. And I think, if there were a way to go back and not have it, I would be totally for that, but that'll never happen. So, I think women should have a voice. People need to stop being so offended. People are so offended these days. So people are then afraid to have a voice because they will offend somebody. And I don't think that's the correct way to go about it. I mean, if you're going to do something good with your life, you're going to have people who will fight you back, people who will dislike you, people who will try to tarnish your reputation. But I think if you're not getting that, you're not doing enough. I respect anybody who speaks up about anything that they believe in, whether I believe it or not. And I encourage everyone to do the same. It feels good to live in that authenticity, and it brings you joy. Because again, that confidence in who you are that requires no validation from anybody, that's the way to freedom.
This interview has brought me tremendous joy, and this is what Behind the Profile is all about, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer Jehl.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm assuming that you're open to taking on new clients should the opportunity arise?
Very open. Yeah, very open.
Excellent. So we'll put contact links for Jennifer in the description. Reach out to her and share this interview with your friends. Thank you so much for your time, Jennifer. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.